You know, since March, his country has accepted more than 200 Venezuelan deportees into that Salvadoran maximum security gang prison. And among them, this man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. There's his photo. Maryland resident, Salvadoran citizen who had an immigration court order to prevent his deportation back to his native country. So the U.S. Supreme Court has called for his return to the United States. But listen to what was said at the White House from both leaders about whether that could actually happen.
The Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan to ask for it?
But the Supreme Court is asking to...
Is that
what was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
in our favor.
In our favor, against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
no version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
All praises, honor, and glory goes to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Hakwadash. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone, and salutations to Akim, pushing this word in all sincerity and honesty, and to the hopeful elect constantly enduring. Shalom, my name is Korah Allah. Lord wants to edifying lesson. It says, Salvadoran president meets with Trump, says he won't return mistakenly deported Maryland man. Okay? And when you listen to the video, which I played the video in the beginning, basically they called this guy a rapist, a murderer, a gang member, right? And when you listen on, there's no real proof. Okay? So this guy's he's a citizen, he's a union worker. All right, he has a 9-to-5. He has a family, right? He lives in Maryland, but they paint this man as a murderer. Okay, now that's slandering the man's name. Okay, now this is a typical MO of Esau Edom. This is nothing new under the sun, But as we move closer and closer to the end time prophecies, this man Esau is going to start showing his horns. Okay, Esau, or the so-called white man. And I say this man Esau is going to start showing his horns. I don't mean, I'm talking about the elites, I'm talking about your governments. Okay, the ones in authority. They will start doing things drastically. All right, doing things. Okay, implementing martial law, implementing draconian laws. So they took this guy from his home and they shipped him over to El Salvador to some maximum prison. Okay, so they put this man in the state of martial law, and they're doing it to their criminals, right? They're doing it to their criminals, but guess what? It's gonna be done more lightly, more easily. All right, so basically preparing you for what's to come. And you saw how easy it was for them to speak ill about this man. It's the same thing they're gonna do to all, because he's an Israelite, okay, and they're gonna do the same thing to all Israel, starting with the men out there on the highways and byways, sighing and crying. They're gonna slander our names, and it's gonna be easy, and the masses is gonna believe it. They're gonna eat it up. Okay, so I'm gonna give a few scriptures, and long ago this makes for edifying lesson. This is Psalm 50:19, says, "Thou giveth thy mouth to evil, and thy tongue frameth deceit," going into the wicked, which the wicked is Esau, Edom. Okay, the ones in rulership right now. It says, thou giveth thy mouth to evil, and thy tongue frameth deceit. All right, so you can't believe nothing that's coming out of Esau's mouth. All right, he lies about his nationality. He lies about how he came into power. He lies about who are the true Israelites. He lies about color. Okay, black and white is not a nationality, that's a color. Okay, it says, and thy tongue frameth deceit. And he deceived the whole world, into believing that he is the one you will even call God and Jesus Christ. Okay. Psalm 15:20. It says, thou sittest and speakest against thy brother. Thou slanderest thine own mother's son. Thou sittest and speakest against thy brother. And what we saw in the news, that's a perfect example of Esau and his wickedness. Okay, how he spoke against that man. Which what his judgment that fell upon him is all spiritual. It's all the spirit. Okay, that's judgment from Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shah. See, 2/3 is going to get caught up in certain judgments, but you're going to have the Lord's elect, the 1/3, especially the men. The women too. All right, Slack, y'all say the 1/3, including 144,000, them out there sighing and crying. That's going to go through things that the Lord is not going to allow Esau to trap up. Like this guy getting trapped up, that's judgment from Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. But it's just a good example that what Esau has planned and how easy it is. And this is exactly what Esau been doing from the jump. All right, so things are coming to the light. You're starting to see this man for the devil he is. So this is Psalm 15:20. Thou sittest and speakest against thy brother. Yeah, who's Esau's brother? Jacob. So Esau's progenitor of the so-called white race, and or I say Caucasian race, and Jacob is a progenitor of the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who are the true Israelites according to the Bible. It says, thou sittest and speakest against thy brother. Thou slanderest thine own mother's son. So that's the slander. All right. Now, if even now in the media, you look up Israelites, it's gonna be they're a hate group. Okay, they violent. They hate women. All right, and a lot of negativity. They're terrorists or whatnot. Okay, but that's Esau putting that slander out there. So when he decides to roll, right, coming like a flood in the eyes of the people, in the eyes of the masses or the sheeple, he be justified. Thou sittest and speakest against thy brother. Thou slanderest thine own mother's son. Psalm 15:21 says, these things hast thou done, and I kept silence. Thou thoughtest that I was altogether such and one as thyself, but I will reprove thee and set them in order before thine eyes. Right. So Esau done all these wicked things to Israel, and he figured, it's a good thing because the Lord didn't judge him in that moment. Okay, but the thing is this: Esau's is fulfilling prophecies. Okay, he has a time to reign, but now that time is at an end. It says, but I will reprove thee and set them in order before thine eyes. Yeah, what's going to be set in order? All right, ultimately the order is going to be established. So Esau is supposed to be on the bottom, and Israel is supposed to be on top. Let's take a look at Esau's blessing. This is Genesis 27:34. And when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry, and he said unto his father, bless me, even me also, O my father. So, and he said, thy brother came with subtlety and taken away thy blessing. Because as the firstborn, you're supposed to get, the cream of the crop. You're supposed to get the best of everything, and as the firstborn. But the spirit had to where Jacob was the secondborn, but Jacob ended up getting all the blessings, all the good blessings, or the best blessings. All right, the pick of the litter. And he said, thy brother came with subtlety, right? Jacob, Yaquab, or supplanter. It says, and he said, is Genesis 27:36. And he said, is not he rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he has taken away my blessing. And he said, hast thou not reserved a blessing for me? Okay, but your blessing and your birthright goes hand in hand. And Isaac answered and said unto Esau, behold, I have made him thy lord, and all his brethren have I given to him for servants, and with corn and wine have I sustained him. And what shall I do now unto thee, my son? So Isaac said it. All right. He said, I made your brother your Lord. He's Lord over you, Esau. Ain't nothing I could do. You in servitude to Israel, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And this is why Esau is mad till this day. This is what the hate stems from. All right. And Esau said unto his father, hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. So he cried some more. Ain't nothing like hearing a grown man cry, man. And so this is the blessing. Genesis 27:39. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, behold, it says, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above. So, in other words, you're going to have the best of everything. All right? The fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above. It says, Genesis 27:40, and by the sword shalt thou live, and shall serve thy brother. By the sword shall you live. All right, the sword is the gun. How did Esau gain his establish his kingdom, his wealth, his rulership is by the sword. Okay, which everything when you deal with Esau, everything is the sword. Even the tongue. It says, and by the sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother, and shall come to pass when thou shalt have the dominion that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. And that happened during the time of the Renaissance. Okay, during the time of the Dark Ages, Esau was in subjection. All right, Esau was in servitude. There's a book called Nature Knows No Color Lines, which brings out that fact, and that's a fact that Esau tries to hide through their schools. Okay, but they cannot hide that fact. It's been brought out. It says, thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. Right, during the time of the Renaissance, Esau came into power, and they put Jake in a position of servitude. So they broke that yoke, and they still running free till this day. And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. And guess what? They've been slaying us. Okay, since they came into power, since the Renaissance period, Jake has been slain. All right, captivity, destroying our, or, you know, I wouldn't say brainwash, but, you know, mangling our thoughts, taking away our, you know, our history from us, our nationality, our heritage, right? Leave it to Esau. They'll tell you that we came from Africa, and originally we were monkeys and whatnot, but that was all created so Esau would keep us in a position of servitude, right? But Esau's blessing was nowhere greater than Jacob's blessing, okay? Where it says, Genesis 27:37, and Isaac answered and said unto Esau, behold, I have made him thy lord, and all his brethren have I given to him for servants, and with corn and wine have I sustained him. And what shall I do now unto thee, my son? Okay, so everybody is really, all these nations is made to serve under Jacob, and that's really how the Lord set it up. It's all the spirit that He made. Esau come out first, but then you had Jacob coming out holding his heel, representing pulling him out of power. This is 2nd Ezra 6:7. Then answered I and said, what shall be the parting asunder of the times? Right. When shall be the change of the times, or the change of the ages, or rulership? Or when shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth? Right now we're in Esau's time or age to rule, but now it's going to be a whole new age, a whole new rulership. Okay. And the Israelites are going to rule under Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. And he said unto me, from Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born, of him Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. Okay, so that was straight to the point. Back to the lesson. This is Psalm 64 and verse 2. It says, hide me from the secret counsel of the wicked, from the insurrection of the workers of iniquity. Right, because everything is really done in secret. Esau make these laws and legislations that they pass, and the secret agenda is to keep the nation of Israel in subjection. Okay, if they could, they'll just kill us all off. There'll be no more Israelites. But Yahweh Bashim Yahshua would not allow that, okay, because He put His name on us. It says, who whet their tongue like a sword and bend their bows to shoot their arrows, even bitter words. All right, so that's what we were listening to in the beginning. All right, the bitter words that they're bringing upon Israel. All right, and that's exactly what they're going to do, and that's how they're going to do it. They're going to get up in the media. All right, they're going to have it on the news. They have it on radio stations. They're going to have it in movies. Like that movie, Trading Places with Eddie Murphy. All right, they said Eddie Murphy his character was doing bad, homeless, and they said, listen, man, you came up in a bad environment. Then they straight up said it. They said, of course you did. You a nigga. All right, now Eddie Murphy in the movie he portrayed himself as being really intelligent, really smart, dealing with the stock markets. Okay, but that's not the part that people gonna remember. The part people gonna remember is when you said the so-called Negroes grew up in poor environments because they niggas. All right, so now, anytime you see a nigga, a so-called nigga, you interpret that as, a bad environment, wicked, gonna steal your purse, all right, stuff like that. But that's the vibration that's pushed out there. Okay, so it says, hide me from the secret counsel of the wicked, from the insurrection of the workers of iniquity, who whet their tongue like a sword, right? They pass those bills, they make these laws, and bend their bows to shoot their arrows, even bitter words. But it said, hide me from the secret counsel of the wicked. So who's going to be hid? The elect is going to be hid, all right? 2/3, you're going to be destroyed, all right? Because this guy that got sent over there to El Salvador, he probably, been doing all sorts of wickedness. Who knows? Okay. So anyways, it says, the whole chapter is good, but I'm going to end it here for time's sake. I want to say once again, all praise, honor, and glory goes to Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashim Hakwadash, double honor to the apostles, bishops, and elders, great millstone. And salutations that I can push in this word, sincerity and honesty, and the hopeful elect constantly enduring. Shalom.